Hello everyone, this is the first devlog for my Voxel style MMORPG, Rift Realms Collide. Now, to get into this, I'm aware that making an MMO is pretty big, it's a pretty big undertaking, and it's going to be a lot of work. So in order to make sure I get things done right the first time, I'm going to be working on the tech rather than the actual game itself. I'm going to take a systems first approach, basically. So instead of going straight into making the full RPG, I'll create smaller prerequisite games and tech demos to refine different mechanics before everything comes together. And in order to do this, I am going to be creating a special framework for voxel style games so that I can keep each system decoupled, and then when I'm done with the system, I can move it between games as needed. The goal is to make sure every system is polished before it enters the final game. That means testing movement physics, destruction physics, the networking, all of it, in smaller areas first. Alright, let's talk about this framework. So, in terms of what we have for this framework already, I've implemented a chunk-based replication system for the world, as well as palette-based compression. The world is stored in buffers, basically, in chunks, so that the server memory doesn't explode. And all of it is stored in a sparse tensor, so that lookups are fast, and the data doesn't, get too big. In terms of what we have for that replication system, on the client side we have support for transparent blocks, textured blocks, and emissive blocks, or glowing blocks basically, as well as models. We have this little cool statue here. I'm going to press play and show you something else. So when I press play, obviously the world loads in, and you can see that it loads in chunks around me. And take a look at the receiving data. It hovers around 30 kilobytes, which is pretty good. And it stays that way even at a level of 64 render distance. Now, obviously you see the model there, but I also have multi-block models. And also you might have noticed before that this was just void. This is part of the terrain generation system. Currently I only have it putting a layer of bedrock at the bottom, just so that I can walk around and test things. And this is the new character model, by the way. Now, let's talk about something else, something important. In order to make this work optimization-wise, I have created it so that the blocks and the parts, basically, they only exist on the client. And then on the server, everything exists in pure data. Now, what does that mean? That means we can do really fast edits of the world. As a matter of fact, filling in this massive plane of bedrock, even though it's millions of blocks, actually only takes less than a second, which is pretty insane. Now, in terms of what else that has to be added, or that had to be added anyway, raycasts. Let me show you something. I'm going to switch to the server side to show you my dilemma. And here's the dilemma. The world doesn't exist on the server side. It only exists on the client side. Now, what does that mean? That means I can't use raycasts. I cannot at all, because there's no parts to raycast on the server side. So I could use the built-in raycast on the client side, but that would be unsafe, right? For using it for hitboxes and things like that, there's no point. So I implemented a custom raycast using the DDA traversal algorithm. I will be linking that in the description if you'd like to learn about it. I will also be linking the palette-based compression, basically how I learned about it. And finally, the final optimization to talk about is greedy meshing. So you might have noticed all these parts everywhere here, right? If I go to wireframe mode, check this out. Adjacent parts actually combine with each other. An explanation of the greedy meshing algorithm will also be left in the description. I think LTOB actually created a really good way of explaining it on the dev forum. I'll put the link there. Anyway, so we talked about the framework. Now let's talk about tooling. I've created custom tooling to interface this framework because obviously certain things are a lot harder to do when you don't have technical knowledge of how the framework works. So let's talk about models for a second. You might have noticed these really cool looking blocky models and thought to yourself, how did you make them? Are they made out of parts? Yes, they are made out of parts, but it's very tedious to place part by part. So what I did, in order to expedite that process of placing part by part, is creating a modeling tool directly inside of Roblox. Now, originally, I would make things in external programs like Magic Voxel, or at some point I actually did it in Blockbench, but that was a pain. downloading it, setting up the model, putting it into Blender, baking the texture, and then sending it up in here. I didn't like that pipeline. Maybe there was a better way to do it, but I already made this, so I don't really care. So let's show you exactly how this tooling works. So I've prepared a little model here. Actually, you know what? Let me show you how to make a new file. So click New File, Confirm. I name the file, let's say, YouTube test, right? And the size of the model, let's make it bigger. Let's do 8 by 8 by 8, right? Confirm. And it's going to create this little area here for you to build in. Now, you might have noticed this little block that's by the mouse. This allows me to click and drag to place oh, I'm in erase mode, my bad. To place a block or set of blocks, right? There's some other settings too, like grid mode, which lets me see a grid that I can then place on. Helps a lot, actually. Another thing is another version of the sculpt mode. So let's say I have this weird looking face and I want to extrude it. I can switch to face mode and then just click on the face to extrude it. And this works with any shape, which is pretty cool. There's erase mode, which lets me get rid of stuff. And there is undo support. Full change history. So if I want to undo a change that I just did, I can do that. There's paint mode, which lets me paint over existing blocks, which is pretty cool. And just to show you something, the greedy meshing is, ooh, not that. I clicked on the wrong settings button. This is still in a work in progress, by the way. If I go to wireframe mode, we have greedy meshing here as well. And if I go to erase mode, and I erase one of these blocks, boom, you can see it remeshes in real time. Pretty neat, I'd say so. There's also some quick action tools. This UI is very in progress. We're missing a lot of stuff. This is some flip tools, rotation tools, mirroring, moving, and clearing everything that exists. Now, back to voxel mode so I can show off some other things. Glowing blocks, support for that as well, which is pretty cool. And a mirror mode. So I can turn on mirror mode, so it mirrors on the x-axis. I can make it mirror on the x and y-axis, and on the z-axis as well. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And then there's a global toggle so that I can turn it off as needed. Speaking of which, it looks like a pain to have to click back and forth. Well, guess what? There are keybinds. So if I press X, and let me change the color to, let's say, green, I can then paint green, right? And if I press Z, I can switch back to placement mode. And there's some other modes here which you might have noticed, like this color picker. If I hold Alt, I can switch to the color picker, and I can pick a color, like this bright blue here. And then I can go back to green. Boom. I can also pick a color from the workspace. So yeah, now we have the brown of this wood. Anyway, gonna clear this. What else? There's a toggle for this as well. I never use it, but anyway. Let's say I fill in this giant block here, right? And I also have this other block and this other block. And I want to change everything of a given color all at once, right? So I have all these other colors here. And let's say I wanted to make this brown blue. I can press V, and then I can just click on it, and everything of the same color will be changed. Now, obviously, I have some different settings for this. This isn't fully finished, but erase mode works, which is all right. And I don't think connected works. If I change this to like this color. No, it doesn't. Okay. Anyway. So yeah, like I said, very in progress. You might have noticed that there's this, but then there's also this. So let me click save and quit real quick so I can just show you something. There's also an import tool. So I can scroll down and let's see, where is that model? Here we go. YouTube test. Confirm. It's going to ask me what size. I'm going to make it 0.125. And confirm. And here you go. It imports it. Pretty cool. Now, those modeling tools, they're pretty good, but there was a problem with them in the back end that caused me to have to rework everything from the ground up. And I've made a much more decoupled version, which I'm about to show you right now, that is still in progress as well. But when I turn it on and I go down here, you can see this is the new version. It has a new dragger widget, and it's still very in progress as well. And you can see there's a bunch of other tools like select, move, and scale. Now also that's here is this. So you see how there's multiple areas you can make stuff in? And these also have multiple different grid sizes. This is 1/8 of a stud, while this is 1/4 of a stud. and I can smoothly transition between them. This is just for models that might be multiple different stud sizes. I don't want to do that for my game specifically because obviously I don't want to have mixels but with voxels, so I will be avoiding that. Now anyway, I'm going to toggle this closed since I'm done with it. That's a bug. I got to fix that. And let me show you the next bit of tooling, which is the build tools. So, you probably notice all these blocks here and notice that they get deleted when I press play because on the server side it didn't exist anymore. That is by default. So, currently the world actually has a, where is it? Here we go. A chunking system before the world is actually loaded in. And to be able to build in this world in a way that's compatible with the chunk loading system, I've created this plugin. And this plugin allows me to click and drag to place blocks, which I think is pretty cool. It also greedy meshes as well. So if I go to wireframe mode and I start placing blocks next to each other, you can see that they start combining and everything. And there's also a paint mode, so I can change this to wood. Let me go back to shaded mode. Boom. And it optimizes part counts in real time. And here is the lantern block, which is pretty cool. And if I want to get rid of stuff, it's erase mode. Simple as that. I'm also working on a terrain mode, which will let me build terrain for pre-made maps, as well as a terrain gouging mode, which lets me erase terrain in bulk. And I haven't finished it yet, but I will. There's also an inventory. Currently, there's only 6 block types. These are grass and dirt. I haven't made textures for them yet, but if I were to add them, hold on, here, you can see that's dirt, and this is grass. Like I said, no textures, literally nothing at all. The modeling tools, once they are completed, will be linked in my Discord. The Discord is linked in the description, and hopefully in the future, once I get some games going and the modeling tools are finished, I can have community-made content. I will have a section of the Discord dedicated to submitting community-made models once the actual modeling plugin is finished. Speaking of which, if you like what you see, you like this game or how the game's development is going and you want to keep seeing more of it, go ahead and give me a subscribe. And if you like this video, give me a like and comment E for the algorithm. That is all. Thank you.